Hey everyone, welcome back to Daily Devotions. Pastor Steve here walking with you in God's Word. We're in Judges chapter 8, and we're still in that narrative of being able to see God's provision, God's strength, and God's abiding with Gideon. As he's narrowed them down to 300, and as they've rallied the people of Ephraim, talking about Manasseh and being able to understand more nations, helping them out, being able to not come to the battle, but as those 300 went for the battle, they scattered the Midianites and the Amalekites and all the eastern peoples. And as they are fleeing, we get to see the help that is needed from the other clans, from the other tribes of Israel, helping Gideon bring to annihilation these people. And so we get to see that in chapter 8, and as they're continuing that pursuit, we get to see that the continual faithfulness of Gideon, and who he gives glory to. His strength of strategic thinking is important here, and also being able to actually bring peace in and amongst Israel, and then being able to hopefully have a legacy of that. Judges chapter 8, a continual walk of God leading Israel through Gideon, and where we come to an end of Gideon in the end of chapter 8. Verse 1, chapter 8 says, "Now the Ephraimites asked Gideon, 'Why have you treated us like this? Why didn't you call us when you went to fight Midian?' And they criticized him sharply." If you go a couple of verses before that, he called upon Ephraim, and they were called to the waters of the Jordan, because they were the Amalekites and Midianites were fleeing and going east of the Jordan with the Jabbok River, just a little bit of south of the Sea of Galilee, about 10 miles south. And being able to capture them there, you're going to see some cities like Peniel, you're going to see Succoth, east of the Jordan, where they're going to pursue them there. And the Ephraimites were saying, "Why didn't you call on us earlier? Why didn't you call on us when you went into battle, rather than call on us while they're fleeing and they're running and we're going to have to run after them? We could have done the battle there." Well, Gideon knows, and he's going to explain real quickly, understanding that this is the battle of the Lord, and he's called me actually to these 300 people rather than all these clans, because he wants the glory. He receives the glory. So verse 2, he says, "But he answered them," Gideon answered them, "What have I accomplished compared to you? Aren't the gleanings of Ephraim's grapes better than the full grape harvest of Abiezer? God gave Oreb and Zeb, the Midianite leaders, into your hands. What was I able to do compared to you?" At this, their resentment against him subsided. You have to understand that what I've called you into places, I've called you into success. You got Oreb and Zeb. You were the ones that actually conquered them and brought us closer to the end of that battle. You are not, why do you have resentment? You are not lacking in the plunder, in the provision. So as he's speaking to that, their resentment against him subsided. Gideon and his 300 men, exhausted yet keeping up the pursuit, came to the Jordan and crossed it. He said to the men of Succoth, "Give my troops some bread. They are worn out, and I am still pursuing Zebah and Salmunna, the king of Midian." But the officials of Succoth said, "Do you already have the hands of Zebah and Salmunna in your possession? Why should we give bread to your troops?" Then Gideon replied, "Just for that, when the Lord has given Zebah and Salmunna into my hand, I will tear your flesh with desert thorns and briars." From there he went to Peniel and made the same request of them, but they answered as the men of Succoth had. So he said to the men of Peniel, "When I return in triumph, I will tear down this tower." Now Zebah and Zalmunna were in Karkor, with a force of about 15,000 men, all that were left of the armies of the eastern peoples. 120,000 swordsmen had fallen. Just want to read that number to you again. 15,000 men are left. 120,000 have already fallen. Gideon went up against this army, 135,000 strong, with 300. The battle is the Lord's. Nothing's impossible with God. 120,000 swordsmen had fallen. Verse 11, Gideon went up by the route of nomads, east of Nobah and Jogbehah, and fell upon the unsuspecting army. Zebah and Zalmunna, the two kings of Midian, fled, but he pursued them and captured them, routing their entire army. Gideon, son of Joash, then returned from the battle by the pass of Heres. He caught a young man of Succoth and questioned him, and the young man wrote down for him the names of the 77 officials of Succoth, the elders of the town. And then Gideon came and said to the men of Succoth, Here are Zebah and Zalmunna, about whom you taunted me by saying, Do you already have the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna in your possession? Why should we give your bread to your exhausted men? He took the elders of the town and taught the men of Succoth a lesson by punishing them with desert thorns and briars. He also pulled down the tower of Peniel and killed the men of the town. Then he asked Zebah and Zalmunna, What kind of men did you kill at Tabor? Men like you, they answered, each one with the bearing of a prince. Gideon replied, Those were my brothers, the sons of my own mother. As surely as the Lord lives, if you had spared their lives, I would not kill you. Turning to Jethro, his oldest son, he said, Kill them. But Jethro did not draw his sword because he was only a boy and was afraid. Zebah and Zalmunna said, Come, do it yourself. As is the man, so is his strength. So Gideon stepped forward and killed them, and took the ornaments off their camels' necks. It would have been a disgraceful death for a boy to be able to kill these kings, and that would have testified and shouted loud. But Jethro wasn't ready for that. Gideon stepped forward in the taunting of Zebah and Zalmunna and took their lives. Not just took their lives, took their possessions, took their ornateness as kings, understanding that he had true power over them. He knew that it wasn't his power, and that's where we head next. Verse 22 says, The Israelites said to Gideon, Rule over us, you, your son, and your grandson, because you have saved us out of the hand of Midian. But Gideon told them, I will not rule over you, nor will my son rule over you. The Lord will rule over you. Quickly, because of his presence and his leadership of 300 to take down 135,000 swordsmen, the armies of Midian and Amalekites, and being able to the eastern people, they're seeing that and they're saying, we need him to rule because we like what he does. But Gideon is steadfast. He actually understands. While they thought it was Gideon and his leadership and his strategic thinking and being able to call upon the people when he needed to, Gideon knew full well, I am just a man. It was the Lord. You got to remember, it was the Lord. How quickly we forget. How quickly we forget the testimonies of our past, the provision of our past, and being able to know we just want to lump it with whatever's close to us. We want to come forth and being able to what's brought us comfort or what's brought us a little bit of provision in our lives. But we have to just take that step back as good stewards, as Israel failed to do, and just say, this is the Lord's. My life is the Lord's. This provision is the Lord's. This strength that I have is the Lord's. Gideon took that step back and said, I'm not going to rule over you. It wasn't me who was ruling anyways. It had strength in any kind of way, leadership in any kind of way. God used me, and so the Lord will rule over you. And he says, I do have one request, that each of you give me an earring from your share of the plunder. It was the custom of the Ishmaelites to wear gold earrings. And they answered, we'll be glad to give them. So they spread out a garment, and each man threw a ring from his plunder onto it. The weight of the gold rings he asked for came to 1,700 shekels, 43 pounds, as your footnote says, not counting the ornaments, the pendants, and the purple garments worn by the kings of Midian or the chains that were on their camels' necks. Gideon made the gold into an ephod, which he placed in Ophrah, his town. Here's where the waywardness of man, even though the faithfulness of Gideon, comes to battle. He collects this plunder, he melts it, builds an ephod, and then puts it in his town. And here we go. Distracts the people from worshiping the one true God with this possession. And all Israel prostituted themselves by worshiping it there, and it became a snare to Gideon and to his family. Thus Midian was subdued before the Israelites and did not raise its head again. During Gideon's lifetime, the land enjoyed peace 40 years. Jerubbaal, son of Joash, Gideon, went back home to live. He had 70 sons of his own, for he had many wives. His concubine, who lived in Shechem, also bore him a son, whom he named Abimelech. Gideon, son of Joash, died at a good old age and was buried in the tomb of his father Joash in Ophrah of the Abiezrites. No sooner had Gideon died than the Israelites again prostituted themselves to the Baals. They set up Baal-berith as their god, and did not remember the Lord their God, who had rescued them from the hands of all their enemies on every side. They also failed to show kindness to the family of Jerubbaal, Gideon, that is Gideon, for all the good things he had done for them. The story, the narrative will continue to go on into chapter 9, but here we get to see so close, but here we say at the place where Joshua put these covenants in place at Shechem. Here they're disregarding and distracted by the comfort, by the things of this world for themselves. That's what the Baals were. Selfish idols right in front of them rather than the Lord, the one who saved them, ruling over them. May we not this day run to the things that are so close to us in this world for affirmation, for acceptance, for worship. As we look around and the means that we have in this life, let us not worship it, but rather we worship the one true God, saying, thank you. Thank you for providing the things around me, my friends, my family, my house, my home, my things that I have, even the money that you've given to me. But let me not worship it. Let me see it as your provision. Let me see it as a means to be able to bring about the things of your kingdom. And let me just thank you this day, unending. Let me pass that down to my children, to my grandchildren, so that they will have you rule over them rather than the things of this world rule over them. It takes prayer. It takes the power of the Spirit. And blessed are we because we have those. Pray today. Be blessed and empowered by the Spirit to be able to worship God and Him alone. For He has done incredible things. Saved Israel through Gideon. Saved you through the life and the death and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Thanks be to God. Have a blessed day.